In Darwin, another sunny day, 32 degrees.
We'll go back to our coverage of the Bangkok bombing in just a moment, but let's stay home for the moment. And debate continues this morning over whether there'll be a referendum or a plebiscite over legalising same-sex marriage and whether it will be held before or after an election. To get more on this and other issues in Parliament this week, we go to Canberra.
We're joined by the Assistant Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg. Josh Frydenberg, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Nice to be with you, Virginia.
Can I just ask you, first of all, whether the government has heard anything formally from the Thai government about their investigations into this bombing in Bangkok overnight?
Well, clearly this is a shocking development, and the high casualty rate, particularly in a very public place in Bangkok, is very worrying. DFAT has put out a statement earlier today to say that they're working with the Thai authorities to determine if any Australians are affected, but I know Julie Bishop will have more to say about this today. But clearly this is still an ongoing matter, and we're talking to the Thai authorities very closely.
We'll move on to other matters closer to home, and as we reported earlier, the Senate has again rejected that government bill to try and put unions under greater scrutiny. This does give the government a double dissolution trigger. Are you inclined to use it?
No, we're inclined to serve our full term. That's what we were elected by the Australian people to do. But it's quite clear that the Labor Party and the Greens and others in the Senate are refusing to ensure we get rid of the lawlessness on our building sites. I mean, the Australian Building and Construction Commission was effectively a cop on the beat. It came out of the Coal Royal Commission, and it produced a $6 billion productivity dividend to the Australian economy every year. Now, this is extremely important to the future health of our economy, and we believe that the ABCC should be reinstated, and there should be greater scrutiny of corruption, particularly by union officials.
Yes, but virtually half the Senate doesn't agree with you.
Well, that's right, and also some other good bills have been knocked back in the Senate. That's the reality of life, but we'll continue to make the case for good policy, Virginia.
It is the reality of your political life, but it's also the reality that confronts any government that wants to be considered a success, that you have to be successful at negotiation. You have to be successful at meeting and reaching across the aisle. It's getting to the point now where we could fairly say that this government is almost completely not successful at that.
Absolutely not, Virginia. I don't accept that for 1 minute. I mean, clearly we negotiated through the abolition of the carbon tax and the mining tax, the establishment of the emission reduction fund. We've signed 3 free trade agreements with our biggest trading partners, Japan, Korea and China. They all need parliamentary scrutiny, and there's a large number of other pieces of legislation which we've got on and passed through the Parliament. Just last week we passed the establishment of the Medical Research Future Fund, which can be a game changer.
Yes, but to jump in, Josh Frydenberg, you yourself, was starting this conversation, pointed out, you were the one who pointed out that a great deal of your legislation has been knocked back by the Senate.
Well, some good policies have been, and clearly, that has hampered the job of budget repair.
Right, so that's the mark of your success as to whether you can negotiate with a difficult Senate or not.
Certainly that is one criteria, but also if you look at what we've achieved through the Senate, we've just got through our small business tax cuts, Virginia. That was very substantial, and it was a key part of our budget initiative. So I think we have got some good runs on the ball when it comes to getting through the Senate, but obviously last night we saw an important bill defeated in the Senate, but that doesn't mean it was bad policy. It is good policy. So
has the front bench figured out a marriage equality position yet? Is it to be a referendum or a plebiscite? We're all finding this argument amongst the front bench publicly very diverting, but do you have a position yet?
Well, clearly the Cabinet discussed this issue last night, and the Prime Minister has made clear he wants to deal with this issue of determining what method the people's vote will take quite expeditiously, and I'm sure the party room and the Prime Minister will have more to say about this in coming weeks. But clearly my preference is for a plebiscite. I don't think we need a referendum, and I think the idea of a people's vote in the next session of Parliament is a good outcome considering the nature of that respectful 6-hour discussion we had last week.
And was Scott Morrison told last night that you don't need a referendum?
Look, I wasn't a fly on the wall, so I can't tell you that, but clearly there are differing views as to a referendum and a plebiscite, but they also need to be respected for the right reasons.
Do you find it as strange as some in the general public surely must have as well, that the government has been so publicly arguing amongst itself in this way on this issue?
No, look, I think people on this particular issue are extremely passionate, and we heard that in the party room. You've got to be respectful of those views. I mean, people who put the referendum idea, Virginia, say, well, it would be a binding vote and it would be a compulsory vote, whereas people who put the plebiscite idea say it's a good indicator for the Parliament to resolve this issue. Again, it's non-binding and it's a voluntary vote. So these are different methods. They've been used at separate times in the Australian polity, and you know we can have a debate about it in coming weeks.
Now, you're a lawyer. Are you comfortable with the idea of Dyson Heydon making a ruling on himself, on his fitness, if you like, to continue in that role, an application to disqualify him from heading the Royal Commission? Do you think that's appropriate?
I do, and let's call a spade here. The Labor Party have been trying to undermine the Commissioner and the Commission from day one.
I'm going to jump in there, and do forgive me for doing so. I want to stick with this particular issue because as someone who is very highly legally trained, and you worked in the legal industry for a long time, I just want your view on whether it seems to you to be right that someone who's sitting in the position and whose fitness is judged or questioned, that they're able to rule on that. Does that seem appropriate to you?
Well, I do, because what grounds do they have for removing Justice Heydon? I mean,
but that's what someone independently should assess, surely, whether those grounds are appropriate or not.
Well, I think they haven't made the case yet that Justice Heydon needs to be removed. He said yesterday that he had overlooked the accompanying flyer. He's an eminent jurist. This Royal Commission has revealed bribery, blackmail, corruption, secret payments, secret deals.
Yeah, you're still not addressing my question.
Well, we can agree to differ. I've made it very clear. I think Justice Heydon can rule on that question at the end of today, if that's what it comes to.
OK. Now, we're hearing about Tony Abbott's leadership. There being something called informal soundings going on, according to the Financial Review. Have you been informally sounded out?
I certainly haven't, and I'm a very strong supporter of the Prime Minister, Virginia. Look, we've been behind in the polls before, and if you go back to 2001 when John Howard was trailing Kim Beazley, 2004 when, again, he was trailing Mark Latham by greater amounts than we are behind today in the polls, and with a year still to go to the next election, sure, we need to get the debate back to growth and jobs, but we can turn this ship around, and I think Tony Abbott will retain the Prime Ministership and lead us to victory at the next election.
What if the Liberal Party loses the Canning by-election? I mean, we're looking at news poll figures analysis this morning showing that 10% swing against the government has put that seat on a knife edge. You've virtually lost that 11.8% margin in the seat. So if that seat goes, do you reckon the support stays the same for the Prime Minister?
Well, you asked me to speculate about an event that hasn't occurred.
No, I'm asking you to look at polls that are perfectly clear.
Sure.
that seat is not as safe as it once was. You've got a tough fight there. You wouldn't argue that, would you?
No, I wouldn't argue that. And the point about Canning is that Don Randall, who tragically died in office, was very well respected, and he'd won that seat 5 times. Now, we've selected an SAS captain, Andrew Hastie there. I think he'll do a fantastic job. Governments always tend to have a swing against them in by-elections. Certainly, and we're behind in the polls now, which makes that increasingly difficult. But I'm very confident that we'll retain that seat because we have a very good candidate and we have some good policies to offer.
I want to just quickly turn to a subject that you and I have discussed on this program before. You're a relatively new father with a highly qualified wife. Is paid parental leave a first world issue, as Scott Morrison has it?
Absolutely. Paid parental leave.
That's a dismissive term, by the way, first world issue, meaning it really shouldn't matter in the scheme of things. There's more important things to get to.
No, I mean, I think paid parental leave is an important issue, as well as, a number of other alternatives to get more women into the workforce. You see, Virginia, we're behind comparable countries like Canada in terms of the percentage of women who are in the workforce. And women are coming out of our universities and educational institutions in greater numbers than men. And we've got to see more of them stay in the workforce or enter into the workforce, because that will be good for the economy and good for the society. And one of the means to do that is through the paid parental leave scheme. The other is through more affordable and accessible childcare policies that we've promoted.
And just finally, Josh Frydenberg, can you see a day return when the government's completely in control of an economic agenda and not beset by these distractions? And if so, can you tell us when that might be?
Look, we're getting on with that job now, and we have to remember that Australia is in its 25th consecutive year of economic growth. That's only been beaten by one other country, which was the Netherlands. And if you look at the March quarter GDP figures, we were among the highest in the developed world. Job growth is strong, but we've faced a lot of distractions in the Parliament, whether in entitlements issues, Justice Hayden and the like. We want to get on with the job, and as I said, Virginia, there's more than a year to the next election, and we've got a good case to press, and one of the big issues that we're doing right now is that free trade agreement with China, which will be, huge for this country.
There's your headline. You buried the lead, Josh Frydenberg. But good to chat with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.